This is a dialogue between J. Krishnamurti and Donald Ingram Smith at Rajghat, 1969.
Krishnaji, there are a number of questions I'd like to go into with you. And the first is, do you think it's possible for a man to flower into his uniqueness, his wholeness, within the pattern, the framework of society, within the social tradition?
You mean the actual society as it is, the society, the culture in which a man lives?
Yeah.
Can he flower in it, become whole, that word whole being healthy and holy, H-O-L-Y.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's what I mean.
The society as it is, with its competitiveness, with its social morality, which is not moral, how can a man who is very much alive and inquiring into this whole structure of his relationship to society and society's relationship to him, is it possible, you're asking, for such a man to function within a society?
That's right.
To function morally or technically?
Morally, I mean, because technically he does function within the society.
He has to earn a livelihood.
Sure.
He has to do some kind of job, whether it's gardening or expert in electronics.
Right.
Morally, I should think, I mean, it's so obvious, morally, you couldn't possibly live within that pattern. Live within the social structure as it is. He probably, as he is, he would be completely out morally.
So what is he to do?
What do you mean, what is it?
What can the man do if he can't flower within the pattern?
He would leave it, obviously.
Yes.
He would cease to be moral in terms of society, which doesn't mean he would become immoral. He would be much more moral than society ever was or could be, because then he wouldn't be ambitious, greedy, envious, encouraging war and all the rest of it.
Now, throughout the ages and throughout the world, there's a widespread revolt against the society, probably because it is immoral in its way, particularly among the young. A revolt against conformity in all forms. But the revolt itself is kind of conformist. It's a reaction against. And so it usually develops into some kind of violence, physical or verbal. Anyway, revolt means violence. Is there any way of acting without this reaction against that which one might consider immoral or improper?
Surely, sir, there is. And as you said, a revolt is really a reaction or a resistance to that which is the established order, whether it is communist established order or any other kind of established order. Now you're asking, is there a way of acting which is not a revolt, which isn't merely going up against the established order, but the freedom from it?
Yes.
I think that surely there is. To be free from it is not to be in revolt against it. To be free means obviously freedom from the things which society considers sacred.
Yes, of course.
That means the competitive attitude towards life, the the use of function to achieve status, to have position, prestige, all that is looked upon by society as a most valuable moral thing. And a man who is up against it, who tries to understand it and therefore frees himself from it, that is, frees himself from greed, envy, and all the rest of it, surely he acts not in terms of reaction or resistance, but in terms of what is true, what is right in the given position.
Yes. Then in that context, would then freedom be only freedom from the patterns?
No, I wouldn't say freedom from is freedom.
Yes. Now you have said...
freedom from is still a part of this reaction,
yes,
part of this resistance. So is there really a freedom which is per se in itself?
Yes.
And not freedom from something?
Yes, that's what I mean.
I think that can only be understood and lived when one understands the freedom from the freedom that comes through resistance.
Yes.
When one has really understood or grasped the full significance of the freedom from and is no longer resisting,
right,
then I think one comes to a different kind of freedom which is entirely at a different dimension altogether.
Now, speaking of this different dimension altogether, the mind must be quiet. It would seem from what you say that the brain cells themselves must be tranquil, not active, not thinking about a problem or a situation, not trying to work it out, not searching for an answer. Which means, doesn't it, that you're saying that thinking has for the time being at least to come to an end, for the time being. Now, as this is quite contrary to the usual way of thinking out a problem, of working it out, my question is, what is happening when the brain then isn't chasing an answer to a problem? What actually happens? How is the issue resolved when man's whole past knowledge, which he has relied on, his whole past experience remains unused to solve a problem which has arisen?
I don't know if you want to go into this question very deeply, because it involves a great many things. First of all thinking, doesn't matter whether it's communist thinking, capitalist thinking, or the religious thinking, is the response of memory, knowledge, experience.
Yes.
That is a fact.
Right.
And as long as thought is functioning, it cannot bring about freedom. Thought can never be free because it has its roots in the past. So thought can never be free. Thought can never be new. Because it's still functioning with the background of the past.
Yes.
So thought cannot be free, it cannot be new. That's one point. So the question is, thought, which is the result of memory, the response of memory, and memory is the very conditioning of the brain cells, which is matter also. Now, these brain cells, how can they be quiet when you look at something, when you observe something, when you listen to something, or when you have to act? Isn't it? That's your question.
That is really what
How
it is.
can the brain cells which have been conditioned to function in a particular direction, to function for its own security, for its own safety, for its own protection, how can such a brain be unconditioned itself from all the millions of years of conditioning and tradition and knowledge and experience, and be quiet so that it sees something new and responds and acts in the terms of the new.
Yes.
If this is the question, then one has to understand that the brain, again I'm speaking not from book knowledge,
Yes.
from actual observation of oneself and of one's own, of what is happening in the world. Through this observation one sees actually that the brain is conditioned to save itself, to safeguard itself,
Yes.
to live in safety.
Right.
Because if it has no protection, if it is not secure, completely secure, it can't function. It can function neurotically. It can function contradictorily, and therefore in conflict. Where there is conflict, there is no security. So, the brain, needing security, seeks security in the very conflict it has created for itself. Seeks security in neurotic habits. Seeks security in beliefs, in dogmas, in formulas, in ideals, which it thinks it has security, in which it thinks it has security. But by observing it, you see that there is no security in any of them.
And yet he is attempting to move from security to
security.
Yeah.
But yet he discovers there is no security in those. In the idea of God, in the idea of a perfect state, in relationship between one another, in belief, dogma, in knowledge, in experience, so on. There is no security. Therefore, the truth of insecurity comes to it. The truth. And therefore, the truth of insecurity gives it security.
When you say the truth of insecurity, the perception that it is moving all the time?
That there is no such thing as security. The truth of it. The truth that security cannot be found
In these things.
in these things makes the brain uncertain. Of course,
Yes, yes, yes.
there is fear.
Yes, you have your job and you want to hold it.
Your job, your
Yep.
1,000 other things. So that very feeling of complete insecurity and the realization of the truth that there is no security, that truth itself becomes the security. I don't know if you have understood it. So look, when you meet a snake, your security is involved.
Right.
So your intelligence operates, not fear.
Yes.
Your intelligence says, look out, not fear. Fear existed at the beginning of time with regard to that snake, and that man has been conditioned to run away or destroy the snake in order to protect himself. That protection now is intelligence, it is not fear.
Right.
Now, that same intelligence now operates when it sees that there is no security.
Ah.
And therefore that intelligence itself has become the security. Intelligence has become the source of security. And not in something.
Ah.
Not in God, in a perfect state, in a perfect ideal, in relationships of family, wife and husband, and formulas and all that. In that there is absolutely no security. But the brain realizes sees the truth that there is no security in any of these things. Therefore, it abandons it. In the very abandonment of it is the intelligence which gives it security.
And does into this come the movement that the intelligence being sensitivity to all that is occurring?
To all this is
Yes,
happening
yeah,
around
yeah.
me. After all, intelligence is the highest form of sensitivity.
Yes.
I mean, it's not a question of intellectual intelligence or emotional, or it is intelligence which has observed the whole structure and nature of the human mind, as well as the brain, as well as the nervous system, organic and so on, and that intelligence which protects itself when it sees a snake, and that same intelligence is now operating, that intelligence says there is no security in any of these things. And therefore that intelligence itself has become the house of security. I don't know if you see it.
Maybe go on.
Yes, certainly.
Pursue this question, but rather perhaps approach it a little differently. It seems that to come upon such a new dimension, such a state...
I wouldn't call it a state.
No.
State implies stagnation.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes. Well, in order to come upon this dimension, this movement of life,
That's better.
some fundamental questions have to be asked of oneself. And then, having asked a fundamental question, to sort of watch what happens, what is actually taking place in the mind, in the body, in the whole being.
Psychosomatically.
Psychosomatically. And one such fundamental question seems to me, and has been moving around in me, is, can thought come to an end? Can the thinking process cease? Could we go into this at all?
Yes, sir. You see, sir, when you observe anything, there is always space and time between the observer and the observed.
Yep.
When I observe that curtain, or you, or the tree, there is this space. The me as the observer, and the you as the observed. Now, as long as there is that space, there must be a conflict.
Why must there be a conflict in space?
Because anything that is divided, separated, must inevitably bring about conflict, like two nations.
Yes.
Like two people with their own peculiar, isolating, self-centered activity. The two, though they may sleep together, live together, they are in conflict. Because there is the observer as the me, and the you with your observer as the you. So there is conflict. Now, the question is that the observer is the product of thought. The thinker is the product of thought.
Yes.
There is no thinker without thought.
Right.
So, can there be observation without thought? Can I look at you without the image which thought has built about you?
Yes.
Whether you flattered me, insulted me, whether you nagged me, whether you bullied me, you said I'm a great man, little man, or all that, which your words have helped me to, have helped thought to put together the image about you.
Right.
So, through that image, the observer sees you.
Right.
Now, so there is the observer, the thinker, separate from the thing he observes. The thing which has been put together by thought.
Right.
As memory, as knowledge, experience. Now you're asking whether thought can cease to function that way.
That's right.
So we're saying thought must function in the technological field, completely, logically, sanely. But in human relationship, when thought builds this image of the me and the not me, we and they,
The psychological thing.
then there is inevitably the lack of relationship.
Right.
And this lack of relationship is the source of conflict, which is the me and the not me. The me who is the observer and the not me as the observed.
Yeah.
Now, can thought look at that tree or that curtain or that any other those flowers without the impingement or the implication of thought?
Yes.
To look without all the memories precipitating as a screen in front of my eyes. Surely that's possible.
Yes.
That means when you look, you must give your whole attention to it. Your mind, your body, your eyes, your ears, every sense of your being giving attention to observation.
Yes.
Then thought is wrong.
Can I go back into this? When one asks a question like, can thought come to an end, there is, in the body, in the being, there seems to be an increase of energy when one is no longer asking a question then looking for the answer in the thinking process. It seems as that there's a new vitality in the body, and I wondered whether, the question then is whether thinking doesn't siphon off a tremendous amount of energy, the thinking itself.
Thinking itself does use up a great deal of energy when you are working the technological field.
Yep.
You have to use it. You have to, because there, whole of science is built on information, knowledge, correction, new discoveries, and so on. There you have to utilize your highest capacity in thinking. But is thinking necessary in human relationship? You follow, sir?
I do.
There, if it is used, it's a wastage of energy. The voltage of energy goes down because it's used up in conflict.
Ah.
Because it is a relationship of two images. You have an image about me and I have an image about you, if I have. Then our relationship is really, actually, between these two images of memories.
Right. Yes.
You said this to me and I said that to you. You insulted me, you flattered me, you gave me pleasure, and so on. All that's built up in me with regard to you, and you have similar or more expansive memories, images.
Yes.
So our relationship actually is between these two images,
Yes.
and not human relationship.
Yes.
So thought breeds these images, thought brings about conflict, and that is a waste of energy.
Right.
So if one can be aware of this whole, one shouldn't say if one can be, that's an absurd statement. It is necessary to be aware,
Yes.
not can be, how to be. It is necessary to be aware of this whole mechanism, defensive, self-centered, protective resistance mechanism, which builds up images. And when the mind is aware of this, without resisting it, without bringing in the characteristics of virtue, then it can let it go. And then it can observe without the implications of thought.
Observe externally and also internally.
Of course.
Yes.
Especially it can observe externally. I can look at that tree and without any interference. But to look at oneself without the image of oneself, without a conclusion about oneself, that is right, I am good, I am bad, this is wrong, this is right, without all that interfering, then I can look at myself very clearly
And in great detail.
and great detail, and that gives you tremendous energy.
That is.
And that energy is no longer breeding conflict, building up conflict, but because most of our energy is wasted in conflict.
Just a free movement then, in a sense that is freedom.
It is free movement of observation, of listening, of seeing. And the very seeing is the doing.
Yes. The very seeing is the doing. Now, you continually say, or have been saying recently, and this concerns education really, that there is a difference between learning and doing. So in all man's history, education has been based on memory, and it still is, in fact. The accumulation, the acquisition of knowledge and information, and then using it, right. So we learn first and then act afterwards.
That's right. We accumulate, and upon the accumulated knowledge, from that knowledge we act.
Right.
So there is a division, look at it, there is a division between knowledge and action.
Right.
It is not like seeing the snake and acting instantly.
Yes. Yes.
This is the ideal which I have built.
Right.
Built according to my formula of the past, an ideal that I should be, that I will be, or that I am going to be, a non-violent or beautiful or good. That is the ideal, or a perfect state.
Yeah.
That's the ideal. And which is contradictory or not, which approximates action.
Right.
So the action is different from the ideal.
Only an approximation.
It's only an approximation. So I say, why should you have an ideal at all? The principle, the ideal, the formula, all that. To me, all that's idiotic. Whereas there is only action. And that action is intelligence in operation, which comes only when you see the futility of ideals, the futility of depending on memory except in technological fields, then you are what? You are learning as you are doing.
Learning in the doing.
In the doing.
Yes. Then would you equate perception within is perception then?
So, look, when you perceive danger, you act instantly.
Right.
We don't perceive the danger of nationality,
Right.
nationalism. It is tremendously dangerous because it separates people, it builds up armies, and they are ready to fight it. Nationalism, in that sense, is the most destructive thing. We don't see it, but we are conditioned to it. We
Right.
have accepted it. But the moment we see the danger of it, the actual danger of nationalism, we'll drop it instantly because it destroys security.
So the perception is the action.
Is the action.
Yes.
The seeing is immediate action. And to see, one must be free to look.
This really ends time now.
That's right. Therefore, the whole question of time as a means of making oneself more, making oneself good, becoming nobler, becoming non-violent, all that ceases.
Yes.
Because we are slaves to the word to be.
The word?
The word and the verb to be. Because the moment we use the verb to be, that involves time. I will be.
Right.
I have been.
But what about I am doing?
When you are doing, you not say, I am doing.
Right.
So, the verb to be is really has conditioned our whole thinking. If you didn't think in terms of to be,
Or to be something, yes.
to be or not to be, then your whole action is different. You would have no ideals. You will be always doing, living in the active present.
This is a question on the social level, Krishnaji. It's a fairly wide one. We're always now demanding more leisure, more and more leisure, and we're getting more, but we have to have the leisure, the time filled, and so there's more entertainment. Is there any way through this pattern of having more leisure and not knowing how to fill time, or believing that time has to be filled?
Yeah, that's one of the great problems that's coming up.
Yes.
When man works few hours a day,
Yep.
what will you do with the rest of the day?
Many people are running into this.
I know.
Nearly all the hippies.
Hippies and the leisure classes and, the whole business. What is man to do with leisure?
Right.
Either he seeks more pleasure through various forms of entertainment, the entertainment being religious entertainment,
As well.
philosophical entertainment, intellectual entertainment.
Right.
Every form of entertainment which gives certain kind of stimulus to pleasure.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Now, if man devotes his time to pleasure during the leisure hours, he's inviting more and more pain and fear.
Would you go into that a little?
Yes, sir. Because you see, pleasure implies pain, doesn't it?
Right?
That the moment I have taken some pleasure in somebody or in something or in sex or in having this house, there must also go with it the fear of losing it.
Of course.
And so fear.
Right.
So fear and pleasure are the two sides of the same coin.
Yes.
Now, if man is going to spend all his leisure hours just in entertainment, religious or intellectual or going to football or this or that, then he's inviting psychological disasters.
Yes. Yes.
Because he's going to find more and more life empty.
Right.
That emptiness has to be filled with
More entertainment.
More entertainment.
Yeah.
And he becomes more and more and more lonely, more and more shallow, more and more silly. And for that he has to have more and more pleasure.
So it's an endless.
Endless process. So that is what he's facing. Or he goes off to the moon.
Yep. That's right.
Or
and entertains the rest of the world.
Entertains the rest of the world. Or goes to somewhere else, or lives in the underground, under the sea, and tells what it's like to live, or we probably go and live under the sea, and so on, so on. Now,
it's really image making, creating imagination.
And it is so utterly immature, adolescent.
Yeah.
It's childish. If I depend for my existence on entertainment, I'm not a human being. I'm just a shallow machine. So, if I reject that, though I may amuse myself, I'm not saying, go to the cinema occasionally and so on. If I reject all this form for entertainment, including the religious entertainment,
right,
including the circuses states put on,
the political entertainment.
Political entertainment.
Yeah.
If the mind rejects all that, what have I left? My own emptiness, my own insufficiency, dullness,
Yes.
my stupidity, craving for things which I want, which have no value. So I'm left with myself.
Right.
And myself is a very small blade of grass in a vast field.
Yes.
And I get frightened. So I cling more and more to my family, to my house, to my furniture, and so on, so on, so on. So you follow what is happening. The more I realize I'm empty,
Right.
the more I hold on.
Of course.
Because that's an escape from the fear of loneliness, of emptiness, of having a void in myself. Now, if I don't escape and face that without distortion, without wanting to escape from it, without trying to cover it up, without trying to fill it, then I can look at it,
Just being what it is.
what it is. Then, if I look without the observer, then I am that emptiness.
Yes.
The emptiness is not separate from me. I am that.
Yes.
The observer is that. Right?
Right.
Then what takes place? Then there is no longer a movement away from it. Because any movement I make will still be in the category of escapes, entertainment. So the mind remains with it without becoming neurotic. It becomes neurotic the moment it wants to escape from it.
Right. Right.
So it can remain with it without saying, I must change it. I must fill it. So when there is this emptiness and there is no observer who wants to direct it, then that very emptiness undergoes a tremendous transformation. It's no longer empty. Therefore, there is no fear. Therefore, this craving for pleasure and entertainment comes to an end.
We have looked always through history to theologians, to philosophers, to priests, and later to scientists to solve our problems and our questions. We have questions and problems, and we go to these people, to doctors, to lawyers, to anybody. And now, if we have enough money, we go to psychiatrists. But has any authority, any possible way of leading us or showing us human beings, because we have always looked to authority, but...
So I think it's fairly simple, isn't it? We give our faith to authority.
Right.
We put our trust in the originator of some idea. That's, after all, authority means that. Author of something.
Author of, yes.
You have an author of something saying, we'll create a new state along these lines. And you say, by Jove, it is necessary along those lines. He convinces you, he shows you the reason of the economic, social reasons, and you give your life to it. That is, you accept the authority of the idea,
Yes.
of the person.
Yes. Yes.
Idea or of the person. And then you become a follower, card-carrying member.
Yeah. That's right. Sure.
Or you have wear the cross, or this or that.
Yeah.
That is, you become the follower, obeying, accepting a formula,
Right.
which has become the authority.
Yes.
That God is, or that there is no God, or only the Savior is the person through whom you can go, and so on. We've got slogans, formulas, and they have become our authority. And that destroys the freedom.
Completely.
Completely destroys freedom. And yet, the mind wants to be free, and therefore it says, I'll be free through that authority.
Yes,
through the
uses
church,
it as a gateway.
through the church, through the priest, through the government, through this and through that. But it'll never be. So, authority promises freedom.
It does.
In heaven or somewhere else, and I don't get it. So one observes all this in the world, and someone rejects all authority, except scientific authority, the authority of doctor, and so on.
Authority of the facts.
They deal with facts, and unless they are crooked, one deals with it. So one rejects all psychological authority based on faith,
Right.
based on obedience, based on following. So when you reject that, your mind then has undergone a change.
Of course.
Then it says, I have to rely entirely, the mind says, the reliance is entirely on my own observation.
Right.
I can't depend on any authority for right action. No guru, no teacher, I can't.
But he can depend on his own observation.
Now, on his own observation. Now, if that observation is distorted,
Right.
it's finished.
And it usually is, Krishna.
Is distorted. It usually is.
Yeah.
Because he's got opinions,
Yes,
judgments,
all the time.
evaluations. So he has to become aware of those opinions, evaluations, judgments, implications of virtue. He has to examine all, look at it. And says, well, and realizes they are interfering in his observation. And therefore he rejects that. Then alone he can look without distortion at himself, at the whole structure and nature of human being, which is, he is part of the world, and the world is part of him. So when he looks at himself, he's looking at the whole of the world, at the society in which he lives, and he realizes his mind is the product of the society which he has built.
Right.
The mind, the human mind, is the human mind of the world, not this particular little part of the world.
He's a human being.
Is a human being. And the human being, when he observes himself in that not distorted way, is the human being of the world. So when he sees himself as he is, he can, by observation without distortion, he can change his whole, he can bring about a total mutation in himself.
So we return to the first question, sir, the first one, which is the movement and the flowering of man.
Yes.
The movement and the flowering of him.
The movement and the flowering of man is only possible in freedom. The freedom that comes when there is no fear in observation, in seeing, when there is no distortion, as the Hindu, as the Muslim, or as the communist, as an Australian, or when there is no distortion of any kind, then there is freedom. And you see, sir, in that freedom there is love and compassion. It isn't just freedom.
Not freedom to do.
No, that's childish.
Yes.
Because freedom implies tremendous responsibility. And responsibility is, you feel the beauty of responsibility only when you love.
Then you are totally responsible.
Therefore, freedom and love and peace go together. It isn't I love and then I am brutal. It's the whole thing as one, unfragmented.
This interview with Jiddu Krishnamurti is recorded on the veranda of the house in which he is staying at Rajghat on the north bank of the Ganges, a mile or so east of Benares. The interviewer is Ingram Smith, and it is recorded on Monday, the 1st of December, 1969. The time is just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the shadows are lengthening. The river, which at this point and this season of the year is some 500 to 600 yards wide, is beginning to glow with the reflections of the setting sun. Delicate pastel pinks and mauves and blues are lighting the river. There are, and I have just counted them, over 50 small fishing boats, 2 men to a boat, 1 at each end, drifting quietly downstream, fishing on an apparently motionless river. The colours are changing all the time. Even as I speak, the greens on this side of the river are beginning to predominate. And on the far side, and away to the east, the mauves are growing, and the reflections of the fishing boats on the surface of the water are clear and quite still. There is a great peace under a cloudless sky.